streets of New York City. Porkins Policy Radio. Here's Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Porkins Policy Radio. As always, I am your host, Pierce Redmond. You can hear this show here live every Tuesday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern by tuning into Ocelli.com. Of course, you can also find the show on my website, which is PorkinsPolicyReview.com. If you are new to the show, there are lots of ways to listen. You can, of course, find the show archived both at Ocelli.com as well as my website. You can follow the RSS feed directly on my website. You can get email updates. I am, of course, on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Play, Player FM, Podbean, and many other minor and major podcatchers will, of course, have the feed. And you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel as well, where all of these shows are also uploaded. And if you want to support the work that I do, if you enjoy the material that you hear on the show, if you like the interviews I do, if you like anything about me, you can always go to Patreon. Excuse me. You can always go to patreon.com/Pierce Redmond. And for as little as $1 a month, you can sign up. Today, I'm getting a little echo. I'm not sure if that is on my guest end. But
I don't know.
Yeah, a slight echo. Lizzy, is your phone on speaker?
No.
Okay, well, I think the echo is gone. Without any more technical issues, today I am joined once again by my very good friend Lizzy. She was back. She was on the show. I thought it was a lot earlier than it was, but it was actually 2 years ago. Back in August 2017, Lizzy was on the show. You were on at that point discussing your recent work in Palestine. You have been living in Palestine pretty much exclusively since then, and I'm glad to have you back on the show to talk about the work that you're doing there. But I guess briefly, Lizzy, how are you? It's good to have you on the show finally.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Pierce.
Absolutely. It was such a long time ago. Why don't you just remind the listeners a little bit about yourself? And I do want to preface this that a lot of work that gets done in the occupied West Bank or in Gaza, in Palestine in general, is a little sensitive. So there might be some things that Lizzy doesn't want to talk about on the show or anything like that, and there's security issues. So just keep that in mind on today's show. But Lizzy, remind the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am a musician, I am a cellist, and I am a music teacher, and I guess it was 2 summers ago, it was the last summer and the summer before, I was teaching for a music program in Bethlehem. That was basically like an orchestra program for children living in the refugee camps surrounding Bethlehem. So I did 2 summers in Bethlehem, and for the past year I've been living in Ramallah. And do you want me to just say what I've been doing there, Pierce?
Yeah, please do. Yeah. Let
okay.
the listeners know, because it's a little bit different from last time.
Right. So now I work for a similar music organization, but it is a little bit different. It's called Kamandjati, which in Arabic means the violinist. And this is an organization that's based in Ramallah in the West Bank. And so I teach music to Palestinian children living in Ramallah, also in a northern city called Jenin. And also there's a big focus with the organization that I work for on providing access to music for children living in refugee camps, especially in Jalazon camp, Kalandia, and Amari camp, which are all very close to Ramallah.
Yeah, in fact, I think when I went to Ramallah, we actually had to drive past Kalandia to get there.
Right.
It's just over the border wall from Jerusalem, right?
Right, yeah. So there's a like a small center in each one of these camps, and so we travel each week inside the camps to give music lessons to the kids there.
Excellent. I mean, I guess the first question that I have for you, Lizzy, is that what made you decide to essentially, move to Ramallah, or to be kind of based there more or less permanently? I mean, at the time that you were there, you had also lived in Israel for a while, studying music. But you like you said, you'd been in Bethlehem and stuff. But I mean, this is a bit of a change, right?
Yeah, definitely. My whole life has changed. Yeah, so I'll definitely talk about my journey because it's been pretty wild. So after my first visit to Palestine in the summer of 2017, I came back, and I think I came onto your show, and I was pretty devastated by what I learned about the occupation, and I was really upset with myself because I'd lived in Jerusalem for 3 years studying cello without having any idea about what was going on around me. And I felt like I couldn't just walk away after learning all the truth about what was happening to Palestinians and just return to my life in the U.S. and as if I hadn't seen anything. So I knew I needed to make a change in my life, but I also felt pretty powerless because, I just play cello, I know how to play cello, and I know how to teach, but that's basically, I'm a musician, and I felt not able to stop all the horrible things that happen in the world, And so for a while I was considering just quitting music, stopping what I've been doing for my whole life to, become a nurse or a humanitarian aid worker. So I would be able to help people in a more direct way. Because I just felt like being a musician wasn't doing enough for the world. So actually, I almost went to Liberia to serve in the Peace Corps, but I actually ended up staying in the U.S. and I worked for AmeriCorps for a year, and I taught music for AmeriCorps to children in underserved communities. And that was the year before I moved to Palestine. So during that year was pretty crucial for me, and I felt like during that year I needed to share my experience with other people, right? Because that's one of the main problems, that people don't know what's going on here. So this slogan of the MTA always sticks in my head. It says, if you see something, say something. And so in this case, I felt like it really applied to me. I was I've seen some stuff, and I have to say something. I have to do something now. I'm obligated. I have responsibility. So in that year before I moved to Palestine, I organized 5 events to raise awareness about Palestine and to support music in Palestine. And in these events, I did a lot of collaboration with local Palestinian organizations, for example, the Jewish Voice for Peace and the Coalition for Peace with Justice, based in Durham. And at one of these events, I invited this group from Palestine to come perform in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the leader of that band is the founder of Kamandjati organization, the organization I work for now. And that's when I was offered the full-time teaching job in Palestine, and that's when I decided to actually make the move. But it was a difficult choice because, I'm an artist and I haven't really developed my career as a cellist yet. I've just basically finished studying. So it was a hard decision to make, whether or not to pursue my own artistic development, to find stability career-wise. I also had a boyfriend. I was in a long-term relationship, and I would have to leave my family, who I'm really, really close to. But in the end, I decided to just dedicate myself to this cause. So I'm in it. I'm in it now.
Yeah. And, we should all, or I should preface this that I know that, I remember when you were debating this, and I remember we were talking about it, and you said that you felt like, what were you going to do, and you're just a cellist. But we should preface, you are an amazing cellist. I have seen Lizzy perform before. No, come on. Let's not, but yeah, so, and I think you do have a lot to offer, even with the music itself, which we can get to a little bit later. But I mean, this is this is much different, and I want you to, again, just speaking from your own kind of personal experience, again, as someone too that's lived, on both sides of the conflict, so to speak, in Israel and also in Palestine. But what has changed for you, in terms of living in Ramallah? Have you seen, what's the sort of noticeable difference, in terms of your sort of everyday life? Is it much different from when you were in Bethlehem? Is it worse? I mean, I've been to Ramallah, albeit briefly, and I know some people kind of talk about how it's, Ramallah can kind of feel a little bit removed from the rest of the occupation. I don't really believe that to be entirely true. So what's your kind of experience?
Definitely not. There's a lot of things that you can find in Ramallah that you can't find in other cities in the West Bank. Like, for example, there's a lot of bars, and there's dance clubs, and there's a lot of art going on. So you get to see, and a lot of people come from abroad, and they come and show, artwork, or musicians come and play shows in Ramallah because it's in a big city, and they know that it's a little bit less conventional than the other cities. So it's a little bit more, open, I guess. Yeah.
I guess, though, at the same time, tell us about what everyday life is like in Ramallah, because even though it might, and it does feel more open. When I was there, it was relatively easy to get in. You could, it was, nobody really kind of, looked at you. It seemed like you were going kind of to it could have been any large Middle Eastern city.
Right.
It doesn't feel all that different, say, if you were in Amman or, I don't know, quite Beirut is probably a little bit different, but, it felt like you could kind of be anywhere. You didn't, but I assume, the occupation is obviously ongoing even in Ramallah. Talk about just the sort of the everyday things that are just sort of complicated by the mere fact.
For sure. Yeah. And I'll just talk about, the experiences that have been shared with me by my friends and coworkers who are Palestinian, live their whole lives, still live there today. So basically, they just want to live their life just like any other human being. You try to make a living, you try to raise your family, but there are these huge obstacles standing in your way that you have to face on a daily basis just to meet your basic needs. For example, let's talk about checkpoints, okay? So you have to pass through Israeli checkpoints that are located between Palestinian cities in the West Bank, right? So it's not just when you're crossing the border. These are inside of the West Bank, within the West Bank. And these can be very dangerous for Palestinians. They can be either arrested or even shot at these checkpoints. And they also cause horrible, horrible traffic, which it's a big deal. It's an important part of going from one place to the next, knowing how long it's going to take, knowing if you're going to be able to even get there or not.
Especially if you have a job in another town or another city.
Exactly. And so, for example, the checkpoint from Jerusalem to Ramallah, it's a very large and busy checkpoint. As we mentioned before, Kamandjati checkpoint. Okay, so many people live in Ramallah and they work in Jerusalem. So they've got to cross this checkpoint every single day, going there and then coming back. That is, of course, if they have the Jerusalem ID or work permit. And without the checkpoint, so if there was no checkpoint there, it would take 10 minutes to drive from Ramallah to Jerusalem. But with this massive checkpoint and the poor quality of the roads there, it can take literally hours to get through this checkpoint. So checkpoints are like a huge obstacle that they have to face every day. In addition to the larger checkpoints, they also have smaller checkpoints that kind of like randomly pop up on roads. And these are just made up, it's just like a military jeep that's just parked, on the side of the road, and then a few soldiers just holding M16s up at you. So they'll just stop traffic. It's just standstill traffic, backed up for miles. You have no idea what's going on, right? But once you finally do make it up to this little checkpoint, the soldiers they might stop you and they might not stop you. You don't know why. Right. You don't know if. So sometimes they'll stop you and, take your IDs, ask you what you're doing, even though you're living, on your own land. Like, there's no reason for that. Like, you're not bothering anybody. You're just driving from one place to the other. And like I said, there can be arrests made there, and also a lot of violence can happen. For example, a van from my music school that was carrying teachers from one city to the next to go teach. It was stopped at one of these checkpoints, and I have a really good friend and coworker who was in that van, and he's a really smiley guy, just like super bright and shiny, like just doesn't stop smiling. So when they stopped him at this checkpoint, he just, continued to smile. It's just what he does, the way he is. And they told him to stop smiling, and he just kind of couldn't. And so they asked him to get out of the car, and then they beat him up until he stopped smiling, as if smiling was some sort of crime, right?
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, checkpoints, one really big obstacle that they face on a daily basis. And also, let's talk about clashes. Clashes happen pretty frequently in Ramallah, probably about once a month. And, some are much worse than others. But you're always feeling like you're in this constant state of instability, like insecurity. You never know when the IDF is just going to come, shut down the city, shut down the roads, and start tear gassing, I can't imagine how many days of school students miss because of these clashes, like how many days of work people miss because of clashes. I literally get text messages from my students saying, like, sorry, I can't come to my lesson because the occupation forces are on my street and in front of my door. Like, it's just ridiculous. So they're constantly experiencing this feeling of being unsure about their own physical safety.
What's the catalyst for a lot of this, though, Lizzy? I mean, because is this settlers in and around the area? Is this just sort of, again, kind of par for the course, the IDF can just decide to shut down a couple city blocks of Ramallah for whatever reason?
I mean, within Ramallah, it's the IDF. If they have some business to take care of inside the city, they can do whatever they want. They can just, come down and shut down the city, which they have done while I was there. But outside of the city, it's more settler violence on the roads, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the examples of the brutality of the occupation. But I wanted to mention one more aspect of life that is really difficult for Palestinians
Yeah.
in Ramallah, all over the West Bank and Gaza. So many of my students and my faculty members at Kamandjati, they actually live in the refugee camps, such as Kalandia, Jalazon, and Amari camp. And very frequently, soldiers will enter the camps and perform things called night raids, where they will come in the middle of the night, enter into houses and arrest usually minors. And when the soldiers come, small boys will come out and try to defend, their friends, neighbors, and start throwing stones, right? And these kids are then getting shot with live ammunition by soldiers and dying. So, I have coworkers who come to work every morning, 9 a.m., ready for the day. They're just completely, exhausted because they don't sleep at night because there's, kids getting shot, right outside their window, So that's just another part of daily life that, they just have to deal with.
And yeah, and the night raids are a particularly just sort of traumatizing event too. When you factor in just the sleep deprivation alone. You've got kids
right.
and families that are just truly not getting decent sleep, and on top of that too, the night raids can happen, and like you said, they're shooting at kids, they're dragging families out of their homes and stuff. And again, this is. Generally speaking, the IDF needs next to no excuse for doing or for carrying
right.
out these night raids. They can
right.
kind of come up with whatever wild explanation it is for going in and there's the one of the classic ones, is these stupid rules about houses like extensions to homes and things like that. They've used that as an example in the past, that they're not structurally sound. So therefore, in the middle of the night, they're gonna, drag out the father and mother who, built the extension, which is just an insane rule. But again, so much of this is also just designed to, like you said, have everyone kind of living in a constant state of fear.
Right.
Quickly, Lizzy, anything what about things like medicine, medical care? How is that, in and around where you are and across? Obviously in Gaza it must be way worse, but certainly in Ramallah it must be difficult, right?
They do have hospitals and doctors and things like that, and it's pretty easy to get in. But I think it's the quality is not super high, and if you have a disease that requires a lot of care, you're probably going to want to go into one of the better hospitals in Israel. But then you have to have permission to get into Israel to have whatever procedure that you need, and it's not always guaranteed you're going to get it, no matter how severe your condition is. And many people have died waiting for that permission.
Sure, or simply even died, as you said, waiting in line to just cross over into Israel,
right,
from a place like
and
Ramallah.
I've heard a few stories recently about kids who are waiting for permission to get treatment inside of Israel, who are taken away from their families, taken into these hospitals alone without their families because their families don't get the permission, and then they're just having to go through that whole experience by themselves inside of Israel, away from their family. Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah. Again, another, traumatizing children or traumatizing an entire generation of
right.
Young people. You mentioned before, some of the direct the violence. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? The sort of everyday violence of the occupation.
Yeah. So a lot happened while I was there, and I know a lot happens all the time. But I'm just here to share what I saw in the short amount of time that I was there. So I guess in October there was a period where tensions were really high in Ramallah between Palestinians and Israelis when the soldiers came. A soldier had been shot at a checkpoint on the outskirts of Ramallah, and they decided to close all checkpoints around Ramallah and for a few days. So essentially the city was sealed off. And after a few days, the roads exiting the city were still very, very dangerous for Palestinian drivers because settlers would come to the roads under the protection of the IDF. They would come to the roads and throw rocks at cars passing by. Like me and my colleagues, we couldn't travel and teach at our sites outside of the city because the roads were so dangerous, and we missed about a week of classes because of this. And during this period, there was a woman, you probably heard about it, a woman was killed by stones thrown at her car by a settler while she was driving with her family. A woman, she was a mother of 8 children. And after this happened, her family was actually punished. Their work permits were revoked by Israel, and the settlers who committed the crime were arrested and then released just after a few months. They were released in January, arrested in December. So that's one thing that really, got to me. And then there was another experience that really just broke my heart. While I was out there, I attended a memorial service for a martyr, which is basically anyone who dies defending Palestine at the hands of the IDF. So I went to a memorial service for the brother of one of the students in the program I worked for last summer. And this happened in Be'esha camp near Bethlehem. The boy who died was 15 years old, and his name was Arkan Thayer Meiser. And you hear about this stuff happening all the time in the news, but you don't actually see what, happens with the family. You just see the picture of the boy, and then,
For sure.
This kid died,
Right.
You don't see the people who have just lost their son or their brother or their cousin. So I got to actually sit there with the family and just hear the father of this young 15-year-old boy describe how his son was killed. And yeah, it was this story of there was a night raid in their camp, and his son was one of the boys who went out to, protect his friends and neighbors, throwing stones at a soldier. He was shot in the chest and died. So that was a really intense experience. But then in March, another member of that same family lost an 18-year-old boy. I guess it was his cousin, who was a volunteer paramedic, who was also shot by the IDF and died. Almost every family has a story like this. Probably not this bad, but it's just so common. It's just so common, but it doesn't mean that it's not awful every time it happens.
For sure. No, yeah. That just becomes almost like a way of life.
Right.
Again, Lizzy, just from your own perspective of knowing some of these people, meeting with the family. What's your sense of how people kind of just deal with this in Palestine? Is it, again, I know you're not like a psychologist or anything like that, but just, your own sort of viewpoints on this. How does this affect people?
Well, there is this certain sense of pride that their, family member died in honor, trying to defend Palestine. So that's considered, an honorable way to lose your life. And I guess that's sort of a comfort, for a family grieving the loss of, a family member, that they died for something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a heavy, I don't know. I think there is sort of a comfort in that, or at least, but it almost seems, this kind of brings me around to like the next thing I wanted to talk with you about. I mean, there's a comfort in it, but it sort of just seems like every year the situation becomes that much more dire. And that much more extreme, and you do wonder, to what end, like to what extent, and the occupation seems so kind of solidified, and whatnot, and I think that this can be kind of, it can become, unbearable for people, let alone the people in Palestine suffering this, but, the people that, want to get involved, it seems like such a lost cause, or it seems so overwhelming. And I just wanted you to kind of speak to that. I mean, again, as someone that, truly wanted to do something, and you are doing that. But, I mean, I guess just, talk about how, people can get involved. And again, too, like the sort of, it's such an extreme situation. People can kind of become complacent, or they can, I remember we were talking in some emails back and forth about this. It can seem so far away and so far removed from our own everyday struggles. And certainly it's hard here in America. And I mean, there's tons of, state-run violence, in America as well. So not to take away from that, but, I guess just sort of talk about, I guess first off, Lizzy, how did you feel? Because I think you probably felt a similar way, right? That like, what am I going to do? This seems so overwhelming. And certainly, right. We've talked about this before, off the air, just about how, like I remember we were at the bar talking about this not that long ago, and it was just like, even I was like, God damn, like what, how do you even like do this every day?
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, like, yes, there are so many fucked up things happening in the world. Yeah. Right. Can't deny that. But you can't make a difference. You can't help those horrible things to get better if you don't even try, So my, like, answer to that is just try. Let's just try.
Right.
Like, choose a starting point. Any point of entry is fine. You have to start from somewhere. Choose one issue that you are passionate about. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be about Palestine. Like, we all just want to make the world a better place for everyone. But, pick something that's close to your heart and like get to work.
Right.
We don't have much time here. So yeah, we need to work together. We need to do it now. Another small bit of advice, I guess, for people who want to start getting involved in issues is to make small, obtainable goals for yourself. Like, you're not going to, save the world in one day. It doesn't like work like that. So you need to set small goals for yourself, things that you can do, like focus in on a small aspect of a problem and brainstorm ways on how to figure that out. For example, in this whole, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, how it's involved with the U.S., this whole thing, like, there's so many little aspects that go into it. And one part of it that I've been focusing on is the fact that most people in the States, that I come into contact with, they don't even know what Palestine is.
Sure.
For starters, they're like, I don't know where that is. I don't know why I'm reading about it on the news. I don't know why they're fighting. They just don't know, right? And if they've never even heard of Palestine, then of course, like, they're going to be more likely to support Israel because they don't know what is Palestine, right? And whenever they do hear about Palestine, on the news, it's usually in a negative light, right? Like Hamas is shooting rockets out of Gaza, terrorists, whatever. So that's like what they draw a connection to. So I made it one of my small personal goals is just to get my community around me to understand that Palestine does exist and that its people are an amazing people and that they have the same hopes and dreams and aspirations that all of us have. And that's what I'm focusing on now. So what I did was I did a bunch of events. I did fundraisers. I made posts. And I started to encourage my own friends, my family, my colleagues to, consider Palestine, like look into it, like come see this event where we're going to be playing Palestinian music and eating Palestinian food. Go Google it. Look at it on the map. Like what's the West Bank? What is Gaza? Just look it up online. What's this conflict about? Stuff like this. And in reality, maybe I talked to 50 to 100 people in my network of friends, colleagues, and family. And now those people know that it exists. And maybe one of my friends or family talks to one of their friends about Palestine, and then it opens up some sort of discussion about it. So I know that 50 to 100 is a very small number, but let's look at how we can expand that number, right? If the people that you're talking to can then help you and, spreading the word and helping you share your message. And I have another example of how, this isn't just some, bullshit idea that just sounds good, pay it forward. It's always going to be good. It sounds good and it is good and actually works. So, a short story. A few months ago, I got this Facebook message from a cellist that I'd studied with back in high school. And in high school, we were not friends at all. We didn't really like each other. And so I was kind of surprised to see a message from her. I didn't even remember who she was. And then I was like, oh, that girl.
Yeah.
What does she want? Just kidding. Love her. I love her now. The message that she sent said that she was actually in Palestine and heard that I was teaching in a music school in Ramallah, and it might be nice to catch up. And I was like, all right. That might be nice to see, somebody I used to know. So I ended up going to get a beer with her, and I was like, what are you doing here? Everybody says that to each other. Americans are like, how did you get here?
Right. Yeah. Totally. Well, of all the places, too.
Yeah, it's like, what the hell are you doing? Also, Palestinians ask you that. They're like, what are you doing here? You're from New York? Why are you here? Anyways, but she told me that 2 years ago she saw a Facebook post that I put up about a fundraiser I was doing for a Palestinian music school. And she told me she read the post and she got super inspired and eventually just ended up coming out to Bethlehem and volunteering for that same program I work for. And, and when she went back to her home after that experience, she shared her experience with her friends and her family and her coworkers. So, let's go back to that 50 to 100 people. This cellist I met in high school was one of that 50 to 100 people, right?
Yeah.
And now, that number, we can add the number of people she's shared that experience with to that number. So maybe now we're at 150, something like this, right? So this idea I have, I'm just hoping to create a chain reaction. And I really believe that after just 2 years of, putting myself into this cause, I have made a change.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%.
Worked my ass off to get to it.
Well, I
But,
think,
like,
that
sitting around being like depressed about it and like distracting yourself with other things, just like it's not gonna help.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think the caveat with this, and this is probably a larger comment on society right now, but people are just kind of lazy and a little complacent, and I don't know. I think again too, people can poo-poo, putting a post up on Facebook or liking something, that becomes activism. And I think that is true. But, at the same time, I mean, you did that. Obviously you were following through with it with more actual action, organizing events, literally going to Palestine,
I don't
doing
think
all
that
that.
she would have just gone if like I was just sharing someone's like
Exactly.
like post about Palestine. It was like
Right.
something that I was doing, and she was like, "Oh, I know that person. Like, well, maybe she could help me to do the same."
Yeah, but I think again, it does take a little bit of effort, but I'm just always, just to kind of, heap a little praise on you. You always make me feel guilty that I'm not doing, more, and that I should be
and I'm
more
not
active.
needing to make. I'm not like I don't want anyone to feel guilty about anything. I just like I don't know. I'm just like
No, and
doing
it's
my
not
thing.
it's not like guilty. It's guilty because I think that what you're doing is so attainable. It is something that a lot of average people out there do have the means to do. It just takes a little bit of effort and obviously commitment. But again, like you said, you don't need to go necessarily to Ramallah to see it firsthand. There are things that people can do here in the U.S. I mean, what about that, Lizzy? I mean, what can people do if they're? I mean, I would say kind of first and foremost, people should actually go. People should go to Israel and to Palestine. I think that the contrast is so stark that will really end. The political environment in Israel has become so toxic. Even I'm sure from when you were there, certainly when I visited you there, and that was a while back. It's gotten way more worse. But I think people should go.
Embassy moved to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is just like it's a bad place to be.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean,
there's like Trump paraphernalia all over the place.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Like lining the streets.
So bizarre. I mean, and again, too, there were just the other day there were these like right wing, ultra religious activists. I don't know how you describe them, going into Al-Aqsa Mosque, tearing up the place. They were doing their this weird thing that a lot of the right wing ultra religious groups will do, where they basically run around like the old city in Jerusalem chanting "Muhammad is dead," which is I believe is like it is actually like linked to when Muhammad is meant to have passed away. But such a creepy, terrifying holiday, so to speak. So there's a lot of that, and I think people should see that, even if it's briefly. But speaking more about like what can people do, kind of like here in America right now.
So what I would say is to get in touch with groups and organizations in your own community. Like when I wanted to get involved, I literally just typed in to Facebook like Palestine, North Carolina, and then a group came up. And then I sent a message like, how do I get involved? And like within 2 minutes, I got a message back like, hi, we're so happy that you're interested. Like, my name is this. Let's talk on the phone. So it was that easy, And then I met with them. I went to a bunch of their meetings, and they helped me to organize an event, which was awesome. So, just doing like a cold search like that. Also, you can look into Jewish Voice for Peace. I know that they have branches all over the States. They have a bunch of different chapters all over. I don't know, your listeners all over, but in North Carolina, they have like a whole handful. So, yeah, definitely checking into groups and organizations in your own community. Also, there are websites that do show like what is actually going on there now. The one that I look at most often, even when I'm living there, is Ma'an News.
Yep.
I mean, you probably have other sites that you could recommend, Pierce.
Well, no, I mean, you also, I know you check out Middle East Monitor, right?
Yeah, Middle East Monitor, Palestine
pretty
Chronicle.
Good. Yeah.
I also have a couple of books that I wanted to tell people about. I'm just going to list them, and maybe you can, like, put them on your site
we'll link
or something.
We'll link up to it in the show notes for sure.
Okay, so there's The Gun and the Olive Branch by David Hurst, Blood Brothers, Elias Shakur, The Lemon Tree, Sandy Tolan. That one will be really interesting. That author also wrote a book about the music school and its founder, the one that Kamandjati, the school that I work for. And that book is called Children of the Stone. And I can just send you this list, Pierce, and you can put it up on the website. But there's some good books that you can read as well, just to be informed.
Yeah, which I think is probably, always like the first step. And I think, a lot of my listeners are fairly well informed. But again, it's so easy, given the sort of nonsense and cartoonish nature of like American politics, and it's like every 5 minutes they're cramming some idiotic, presidential candidate said this and Trump says that. It's so easy to become, like I said, it's like beyond complacent. I mean, it's like obsessed with the minutia of basically just nothingness. I mean, it's and then of course, missing the larger things, like when, like how Jared Kushner, for instance, is even like a player, so to speak, in like the Middle East peace process is beyond disturbing. And that kind of gets like pushed aside, until he says something stupid on camera, which he obviously recently just did. We have a little bit of time left here in the hour, Lizzy, and I just wanted you to definitely also tell the listeners a little bit more about Kamandjati, the website. What are some of the programs that the organization is doing, how people can get in touch with them as well? Okay, yeah. So this is a really amazing organization. I would highly recommend you just like even going onto YouTube and Googling the name of this organization and watching some of the videos that they have up. So the organization was started by a man named Ramzi Aburedwan. He grew up in Amari refugee camp in the West Bank, and when he was 8 years old, he was throwing stones during the first Intifada, and I guess it was a French photographer, I don't remember where he was from, but a photographer took a photo of him throwing a rock, and it became like, very famous, and it was up all over the news, and he became, I guess, like this symbol of the first Intifada. So this boy, he grew up to play the viola. Somehow he got a viola put into his hands, and he went on to go study in France, to study classical viola. And he always had this dream of giving children who grew up in the same circumstances that he did the same opportunities of being able to play music in Palestine. So he came back and started Kamandjati School, and we provide music education for any Palestinian who wants to study, regardless of whether or not you can afford it.
So basically, anyone who wants to learn music can learn music.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And it's like I mean, again, just like not that, websites mean much, but I mean, if you go to the website, I mean, you can see this is a huge organization. There's some really amazing pictures and videos online of, I mean, there is also like a full orchestra, right?
Yeah. So in addition to music education, they also do this like huge festival every April where they bring musicians from all over the world into Palestine. It's not easy to get all those people in, but they bring people from all over the world to play this music festival for about 2 weeks. Like, for example, this past April, they had musicians from India, from Afghanistan, from Morocco, all coming together to go to come and play this festival that told the story of Jerusalem. And so all the music that was being played had a special connection in telling the story of Jerusalem and its importance in the Muslim world. So that was pretty rad. And so also every summer they have a lot of international musicians who come and form a symphony together. So they play every summer, and so I'm looking forward to that this summer. So yeah, a lot of music, a lot of performances, a lot of teaching going on. It's just really awesome. Another really cool thing about the organization is that almost all of the teachers who I teach with, there's about 15 of them, started music in Kamandjati. So they started when they were kids, when the organization was first opening, like when it first started. So they grew up with the program, and so they've all known each other for like forever. And so it feels like you're at home when you're at work, like you're in this family, because they all have this like really deep bond. So I really like that a lot.
No, absolutely. Again, people should check it out. It's alkamandjati.org. I'll link up to that in the show notes as well. Even if it's just to make you can make here in the U.S., you can make a tax-deductible donation to the organization, which is also big too. I mean, there's so many restrictions when it comes to donating to organizations in Palestine, but you can even if it's a small, I'm sure $10, anything that you can give is going to help out tremendously. Lizzy, we probably have just like a minute or two left. Is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with? Anything that we didn't get to talk to that you want to address? Anything like that? We have about 5 minutes.
Okay. Let's see. I did want to talk, I guess when we were talking about how Palestinians, like, how do they endure these awful circumstances, like, how do they get the strength to, like, continue? I'm trying to find where did I put this here. Anyways, I'll just tell it. There was this experience that I had. I was at the music school that I teach at, and I was practicing in one of the practice rooms before I had to start teaching, like early in the morning, and there was like a class above me where it was like a theory class or like a singing class, something. There's a bunch of kids upstairs all singing this song. It's really cute. But I was practicing piano downstairs, just doing my own thing, and then I start to hear like gunshots outside, like pretty close. And I looked out and you could see gas and people like running in the streets. And I just stopped playing, and I froze up because, like, I'm not used to that sort of thing.
Sure.
So I was just sitting there, just like frozen, numb with fear. And I was sure that the class upstairs would just stop because, like, some shit's about to go down. But they just kept on going. They just kept singing. The class didn't stop. They didn't stop their song. And so it was a really surreal experience to just sit there and listen to the sound of these little children singing mixed in with like gunshots, like right outside the fucking building. And I was like, well, if they can just carry on, keep singing, like, I'm just going to keep playing piano. And so that's how I kind of like dealt with any sort of like really hard circumstance when I was out there. Just like look around me, see what other people are doing, see how they're like so strong and just like living their life. They're like, I don't give a shit. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. So I just kind of did the same, and like, yeah, makes you stronger.
Total, and I think it just illustrates the power of not only the Palestinian people, but just people in general. You know, we aren't powerless even in the face of extreme violence and oppression and things like that. And you know, if we can, I think that's, again, it kind of relates to a lot of what we were talking about. People feel like they're just going to kind of give up, throw in the towel. And but, you know, if those little kids didn't throw in the towel,
No.
you know, we really don't have any excuse.
I know.
So, you know, I think that hopefully that will inspire more people to, as I said, you know, get involved and whatnot.
Yeah.
Lizzy, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the show. I know it took some technical difficulties back and forth, and it was a long time in the making, but it was excellent to have you on. I would love to have you back on anytime soon, or if anybody from Kamandjati ever wants to, you know, talk about something on the show, they're more than welcome. Once again, yeah, please. Once again, the website it's allkamandjati.org. I will link up to that in the show notes, as well as everything else that Lizzy and I were talking about. Lizzy, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. And please stay tuned. I think I will be taking some calls in the second hour, but I'll be right back after these commercial breaks.
Straight out of the subway in New York City. Yeah, baby. The radio show that never sleeps. Porkins Policy Radio with Pierce Redmond.
Reminder that this is the voice of America broadcasting worldwide.
Transistor Radio.
Morning, morning, morning. Uncle, the podcast.
The Ocelli Effect.
Porkins Policy Radio with Pierce Redmond.
On Ocelli.com.
WallStreetWindow.com. Gold, silver, the stock market. WallStreetWindow.com. The brilliant author of The War State brings you exclusive reports about the big changes upcoming in the markets. WallStreetWindow.com.
Perhaps you're invested deeply.
Perhaps you're not in deep enough. Maybe you're thinking about getting started. WallStreetWindow.com. Michael Swanson, the brilliant author of The War State, understood these trends professionally for many years, and now he gives you the benefit of his knowledge. WallStreetWindow.com. Go there now. Go there now. Go there now.
Entertainment, and more. You will learn something, children's. Ocelli.com.
Now back to the man, Pierce Redman.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Porkins Policy Radio, PorkinsPolicyReview.com. I am your host, Pierce Redman. If you are joining us here in the second hour, we are opening up the phone line. So if you would like to call in and chat with me, if you'd like to, perhaps talk about some of the issues that were discussed in the first hour with my good friend Lizzy, speaking about the situation, the geopolitical security situation in Palestine. We're also talking about ways people could get involved. Again, the organization that Lizzy works for is Kamandjati, and that is just so people know the spelling. It is AL. Then Kamandjati is KAMANDJATI.org is the website. Definitely encourage people to check that out. So if you want to call in and talk about that, or if you'd like to change the subject matter around, you of course are more than welcome to. The call-in number is 319-527-5016. Once again, if you'd like to call in and ask me some questions, I would love to have some listeners on the show. The number is 319-527-5016. If you don't feel comfortable calling in, you can always go to ochelli.com/listen-live, and you can go. That will bring you to where you can stream the show live, of course, but you can also enter into the chat room over just right there. You can create a username, or you can be an anon if you'd like to. Chuck and I are in the chat room, of course. We are monitoring it throughout the live show, the broadcast. So if you want to drop a question in there, you are more than welcome to. I know. I guess just quickly a little sort of housekeeping. I mentioned this last week, and it did kind of come to pass. But if you are wondering where the bonus podcast is for the month of May, I unfortunately was unable to record the show that I wanted to. I did kind of mention it last week. My girlfriend and I are actually moving in together. We're changing apartments, so a lot of baggage and BS comes along with moving in. It's just it's stressful. I am extremely stressed today. I probably won't be able to make it next week for my regular show with Chuck. I will have the live show, but next week I probably won't be around for Chuck because we're looking at apartments, and it's a ton of traumatic, stressful stuff. It seems a little, in retrospect now, I was like before I came on to do the show with Lizzy, I was so wrapped up in my own pain over moving and meeting with the people, and that fear of if I don't take this place now, am I going to lose it? Because some other person is just going to come and swoop in and, this is a good price. But, you start wrapping your brain with all of that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to take away from, the pain of moving. It is a traumatic and super stressful event. But I was so kind of wrapped up in that. And then suddenly I got home from being out in the city for a little bit earlier. And that's all I was thinking about, right? And I get, we'll just all gloves are off, I guess, with this second hour. We'll get a little personal. I see my therapist on Tuesdays as well. Before a little bit before I do the live show, and that's all I spent this entire Tuesday session talking about was moving in. And I became so kind of wrapped up in it and stressed out, and it's just this horrible thing that's going on. Chuck is messaging me, brutal in NYC to move. Absolutely. It couldn't be worse. It's also, and this is a larger problem of having moved, in July,
There's an odd one, Pierce. You dove out. I don't know if you're still there. The last thing we heard is in July, so I don't know if you unplugged your microphone or if you're talking to your mute button. I'm not sure. Computer might have froze. A lot of things might occur here. So, Well, anyway, Porkins will be back in a couple minutes, I guess. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just load up a couple things and play them here during the brief intermission while we figure out where Pierce went. Stick around.
So I guess I don't want to ramble on too much about this. Long story short, moving sucks immensely. It's stressful. It's horrible. All this stuff. I became really kind of like wrapped up in it all day today. Got all these appointments lined up, and it's that pressure and whatnot. And I sort of, not at all dissimilar to what Lizzy and I were talking about in the first hour. I had this like tunnel vision about that, my own life and all these things. And suddenly, I realized that I was prepared for the show today, obviously, but I realized, I haven't like just sort of like Googled, Palestine or Israel. I mean, it's always good to do that before you do, especially with like a live show, something like that. It's always a good idea to kind of, look up the topic that you're talking about, because you don't want to be caught off guard, and or you don't want to miss something important that might, some development that happens about a topic or a subject or an individual that you're discussing. At least for me, I think that's bad live radio form. You should always know. And I realized, I got home and I kept saying, I got to do this thing. I got to look up. I got to, or at least just sort of, glance over my notes, just because I wasn't, and usually I don't like to, when I get home, right, at least that hour from 2 to 3, I think it's good for me to kind of, just sort of clear my mind. Don't think about the show too much. I try to watch some, put on some mindless TV or something in the background, something funny. For a while it used to be I would just have an episode of Archer play, or do 2 episodes just so that it's something totally different. You can kind of relax and ease into it. I don't like to kind of looking over my notes too much and whatnot, because you can over prepare. But suddenly I realized, wow, I hadn't done like any, I was a little underprepared. If only that my mind was not in the show. And I think that once I started talking with Lizzy, I think I did, I was in the moment then. I was like in the show. I was thinking about, the larger issues that we were talking about. But again, it's easy to get wrapped up in our own the minutia of our own lives, of the things that are happening around us that are stressful and difficult, and we can forget about things like the plight of the Palestinians. That can become sort of this far off, distant little it doesn't really affect me, right? I'm not on a daily basis. It doesn't really change my life or what I do, and we can kind of forget about all those things. And again, I think you shouldn't be so concerned with all the horrors around the world. As Lizzy was talking about, there's awful stuff happening every day around the world, in your own neighborhood, in your own country, maybe in your own home. There's there can be bad things happening, and we can I think navigate both of those, and we shouldn't neglect what's happening around us, but at the same time, we shouldn't neglect some of these larger issues, especially when they are things that we can, even if it's just a little bit, we can do something about it. But anyway, I did think it was kind of funny how much I was stressing out about apartments, and then listening to Lizzy talk about people having their apartments raided, having family members being murdered, just the sort of daily trauma that people go through in Ramallah, in Gaza, in the West Bank, all over Palestine, all over the Middle East, right? All over the world. I think we can, we forget how easy it is for us to forget the trauma that so many people endure all the time because of our own, maybe our own trauma, our own requirements and commitments in life. It's difficult. It's hard to to handle all of that. But it was funny, when at the break there, when we were done, I was like, oh, damn, right. Like, now the rest of my day doesn't, seem so daunting. Like, looking at apartments is, it's almost like what a luxury, right? That we have that ability. As awful and crappy as it is moving in New York, it's still, we're at a luxury. We shouldn't forget those sort of things. We should be, a little bit grateful. I know now I'm sounding like very, I don't know, like I'm like lecturing people. I think like, between this and the last show, I seem to have been, kind of, beating that over people's heads, a little bit. But, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm in that kind of a mood. You know what I mean? I'm just sort of, feeling a little, I don't know, like, kind of lost at times and concerned with all these other things. I don't know. It's a strange moment right now, at least for me, in general, but also for many of us. I think we can feel a little bit lost and overwhelmed with everything. But sometimes it takes listening to a friend talk about something else to kind of put everything into perspective a little bit. Again, if you want to call in, if you want to talk about any of this. Please just dial 319-527-5016. That is the call-in number. When you call in, you'll be put on hold, and then we will bring you onto the call. So once again, that number is 319-527-5016. Just taking a sip of water there. But, yeah, if there's anything you'd like to discuss, if you want to talk about some of the topics covered in the first hour, that is always welcome. If you want to change it up, please do so. I guess, I do have there is one thing that I was planning on talking about this at some point on the show, but maybe, today is good when I'm trying to fill the final half hour of the show. There's a truly repugnant character that has popped up in the news, and it was, talk about a bad penny. I'm referring to Middle East fixer and a confidant of many presidents and Gulf Arab royals, George Nader, has popped up in the news because evidently he has been arrested once again and is being held on charges of possession of child pornography. And this is a character who I've discussed on the show before. I can't remember the exact episode, but of course I will try and pull it up. But I have spoken about George Nader on this show. I might have also actually talked about it on Chuck's show as well. But he is he was influential, I suppose, during the Trump transition. That glorious time when Steve Bannon was still in the White House. George Nader was also kind of part of this transition team. It's there's various articles out there talking about the fact that Nader was able, he was basically able to just kind of breeze in and speak to Bannon. There's a picture of Trump and Nader, and I believe their relationship is probably a bit more extensive than the Trump fanatics would have us believe. But this is also someone that he was mixed up with this guy Elliot Broidy, who was a big time Trump fundraiser. He got into some trouble over his dealings with the UAE, where Nader is, of course, extremely close to the reigning monarch in the UAE. And in fact, when Nader was picked up earlier in during, I guess, the sort of the high point of the Mueller investigation, Nader was actually picked up at I think it was at an airport. And when they searched his I think it was 3 iPhones, they found all sorts of child pornography on them. And then evidently, Nader began, working with Mueller, or cooperating, I guess is a better word to use. He was cooperating with the Mueller investigation. There was, of course, speculation that he was going to get a later sentence or some sort of a plea deal, or they wouldn't go after him on some of the child pornography charges, which would historically be somewhat accurate when it comes to George Nader, because after he was busted in this recent time for possession of child pornography, it came to light that he had similar issues back in the mid-'80s. I think this was 1985, but I might be wrong about that date. I don't have it up in front of me. But at that time, Nader was living in Washington, D.C. He was extremely close with the Reagan White House and, of course, with all sorts of various actors in the Middle East. Nader is of Lebanese extraction. And he was, I believe it was in the mail, some magazines from the Netherlands depicting young boys in sexual situations. It was sent to Nader's house, and it was intercepted, and he basically never went to jail. I mean, nothing really actually ever happened to him. There were some criminal proceedings or criminal charges brought against him, but basically Nader was let off scot-free. All of his Washington buddies kind of injected themselves into the legal case surrounding him back in the 80s, and they basically they were able to convince the judge and law enforcement that Nader was so important to national security that he needed to basically be allowed to just not skirt the law entirely. And it was, they used the excuse that Nader was helping to get some of the hostages, American hostages, released in Lebanon. This never happened to my knowledge, but that is, that was the story that was put out there. Then, of course, it turns out that Nader was actually arrested in the Czech Republic and actually served a year in prison. This was back in 2003. He was convicted in 2003, and this was, I believe, the sexual abuse of 10 boys in the Czech Republic. And even I think before that, there might have been another incident where he was indicted for transporting child pornography. A real class act, right? And then lo and behold, of course, he winds up being part of Trump's transition team. He is allegedly one of the go-betweens between Eric Prince and the Trump administration. Nader might have been the one that actually set up this meeting between Eric Prince and I believe it was members of the UAE. Between Eric Prince and the members of the Russian government in the Seychelles off the coast of Africa. Nader is rumored or alleged to have been the person that set that up. But then, as I said, he gets busted again. He then starts cooperating for Mueller, and then he escapes, or he basically gets on a plane and flies to the UAE, where the government there, the monarchy in the UAE, which is, I think it's Mohammed bin Zayed, I believe is the reigning monarch, or at least the ostensible, the head in the UAE. He, of course, welcomes him in open arms. Nader is very much a puppet of the UAE, or, an actor for the UAE. I don't really who's the true puppet master in that relationship, but he's opened. He's welcomed back there. He's kind of given sanctuary, and then he kind of like disappeared. And I remember at the time it was just such a crazy thing, that wasn't making front page news. This guy, he gets picked up. He starts working for Mueller. Then he basically just skips town more or less and just returns to the UAE. Pretty insane. But I believe, if I'm reading this correctly, if I'm they're now I think they're trying to indict him. There is a criminal complaint. I haven't been able to read through all of it with enough kind of scrutiny. But this might have actually been the original criminal complaint. The videos that were found on Nader's phones are, I don't even really want to describe them on the air. You can read about them if you wish to. Not that you really need to. They are pretty disturbing. There's even bestiality involved in this. Some really unsavory stuff. But he like I said, like a bad penny, he kind of he keeps showing up over and over again. And now it turns out that he might be facing criminal charges. Now I can't remember if this stems from Nader actually returning to the U.S. and getting picked up again. I assume so. But again, I didn't have enough time to kind of look over this again because I was so freaking obsessed with my own, life earlier today. I didn't get a chance to look over all of it as closely as I want to. Maybe we can pull up. This is from Courthouse News. And I'll read a little bit of this. It says, announcing the arrest of a witness in special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation with links to associates of Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. Prosecutors said Monday that George Aref Nader had multiple cell phones with child pornography involving toddler-age boys and farm animals. This is, like I said. Nader's criminal complaint was filed under seal over a year ago in the Eastern District of Virginia, and U.S. Magistrate Judge Cheryl Pollock in the Eastern District of New York refused to grant Nader bail this afternoon. Okay, so I guess he must have been picked up again. I guess maybe here in New York. Quote, I definitely believe he has every incentive in the world to flee, Pollock said Monday afternoon. There is nothing to keep him here, end quote. So I'll just keep reading on from this Courthouse News article. In an affidavit accompanying the complaint, FBI Special Agent Ted Delacourt describes the disturbing contents of 12 separate videos he said investigators found on iPhones in Nader's possession, which were seized on a warrant. One video depicted a boy, age 13 or 14, apparently penetrating a goat with his legs tied together, while others depicted boys ages 3 to 4 having their... I'm not even really going to get into this. It's actually just too disturbing. You can read it yourself if you want to. The charges of transportation of visual depictions of minors carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years. So then it kind of goes on. It talks about his previous, history and run-ins with the law. Then it goes on to say, he acted as an informal advisor to the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates, according to the New York Times. There are others. They quote from some other people saying, the U.S. doesn't have an extradition treaty with the UAE, posing a problem were Nader to flee there. So again, that's probably why they don't want to grant him bail. This is, again, only Trump, he hires the best people. And this is somebody that was, hired by him. I know there's some debate over how close they really were, but there are pictures of Trump and Nader together. This is from Daily Beast again. George Nader, witness in Mueller probe, denied release on child porn charges. So, he must have, I should know this better, but I assume he was traveling again and was picked up. Let's see if it says so here. Yes, so Nader, 60, a Lebanese-American businessman, will be handed over to federal agents for extradition to Virginia for his prosecution. He was arrested Monday at New York's John F. Kennedy Airport for allegedly possessing child pornography on a cell phone more than a year ago. So that's the interesting thing here. He was picked up back, I believe this was January 2018, in Dulles Airport on his way from Dubai. So when he arrived at Dulles Airport. And it said in the courthouse news thing, they had warrants for his cell phone. So I don't know that they anticipated that he would have these disturbing images on there, or if they were picking him up because of his possible role in acting as a go-between Trump and the Russians. Although that seems, I don't know, not like that seems almost like kind of small potatoes compared to the other stuff that Nader was involved in. But maybe they did suspect of something like that, and they thought that they could use this against him. But anyway, he did, he cooperated. I believe Nader is quoted in the Mueller report, or certainly, some of his, testimony and questioning made its way into the Mueller report. And then, as I said, he basically left and went to the UAE. How they allowed him to do this is something I speculated at the time. I mean, that just seems insane. You're not keeping tabs on this guy. You're not telling him don't leave the country, or better yet, you're not, remanding him to stay in Washington, or why they didn't even just arrest him outright and charge him is quite insane. Again, if you read the criminal complaint that was written this back in 2018 by Special Agent Ted P. Delacourt, the FBI, I mean, it's pretty shocking that they didn't just arrest him right there on the spot. A lot of I speculated at the time that he'd either cut some sort of a deal with them where he wasn't going to get in any trouble, or the deal was basically listen, we're not going to go after you on these charges, and if you want to or if you want to get out, or something like, listen, we're going to have to go after you at some point. So why don't you just leave, quietly return to the UAE? We'll pretend like, we didn't realize what was going on, and then you can just kind of stay there. So it's weird to me that he returned and was arrested in New York. I don't know what, those signals are really strange. Why he returned, why he thought he wouldn't be arrested. I mean, these obviously there was a criminal complaint against him, or at the very least, I mean, just the fear of, if he got picked up again. I mean, I'm sure this is a guy who's, if he's carrying this kind of stuff around on 3 different cell phones, I mean, God knows what, he's carrying around all the time. So very odd. But I guess the strange, element of this, or the weirdness of this, is just like that it's just like not even a blip on the radar of the Trump supporters. I've already seen this morning, that they're linking, Nader was really friends with Bill Clinton. Everyone keeps sharing this picture of it looks like Bill Clinton, but I don't know what the sourcing for this picture is. I believe it's it's like Bill Clinton and a bunch of other people, one of whom they accuse of being Nader. Although the Nader in that picture has a lot more hair than the Nader that I've seen in pictures, and I'm not totally sure that it is him. But, they claim, you see, this is it, and he's partying with Epstein. I've not seen anything to indicate that Nader and Epstein are friends, that they even know each other. I'm going out on a limb here, but Epstein does not strike me as I don't think Epstein's predilection is for young girls. Ages, 12 to 18, right? 13 to 18, something like that. I don't really think Epstein, he doesn't strike me as somebody that would be shipping in boys or be having sex with young boys. I mean, I think his particular pedophilia or attraction to children is very specific. So I don't know that him and Nader are partying and having orgies with all of these sort of rumors and things on the internet that I've seen. So I don't really know what I think it's a BS thing. I think it kind of goes nowhere. It's just a deflection because, again, Nader apparently at one point, had access to just sort of wander into the White House. He'd go into Steve Bannon's office whenever he wanted to. There's also, and again, this needs a little bit more explaining because I think there's more to this story. There seems to be at some point the Secret Service, in their capacity, as part of their job description to investigate the people that are in and out of the White House, did do their due diligence and found that they did not want George Nader access to the White House. They didn't want to grant him that. This obviously had to be from the fact that they looked into his background in the 80s, the 90s, and probably his conviction and jail time in 2003. Which wouldn't be all that difficult, really. I know that. Of course, I didn't know about it, but the Secret Service would be easily able to do background checks and find that. But just the fact that where was George Nader from 2003 to 2004? It's a little hard to kind of like cover up a jail time or something like that, where it's like he disappears for a year. So the Secret Service felt uncomfortable. And I believe they blocked his access, or that they submitted to Trump and others that he shouldn't be in there. And it's my understanding, and again, I need to do a little bit more research on this, but from what I remember at the time when I was looking into this, Trump overruled that and allowed Nader to come in. I've also seen it reported in various places that sometimes he would sign his name George Vader instead of Nader on White House, the logs when people are coming in. Also, like a weird thing to do and not all that clever. Nader, Vader. Come on. But I don't know. Maybe that's how it works. And there is, in fact, there's a picture with Trump and this guy. So clearly there is some kind of a connection. Chuck is telling me, when the Secret Service checks you, they know your grade school record. So yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt that people in the Secret Service knew who this guy was. And that they requested that he not, that he be denied access. And then it seems that Trump and others overruled that. I believe it was really, Trump is probably, the buck stops with him. And I believe that, this has been reported on as well, that he kind of stepped in and said, no. And I've already seen people, on Twitter, the QAnon fanatics trying to spin this, that, you keep your enemies closer. That's what Trump is doing. He's just keeping Nader and all these other deviant sexual abusers closer to him, so that I guess he can arrest them. I don't know. It's funny. I just saw there was this other QAnon fanatic. I actually don't know if he's really like a cultist or a bit more of a cult leader associated with QAnon. I forget I think his name is David Hayes. He also goes by the Praying Paramedic or something like that. He's one of these, YouTube QAnon whisperers. Just the other day, though, he was talking about the mass arrest. Don't worry, they've all pled guilty already. He's, it doesn't matter if Hillary Clinton isn't locked up. She's signed away the plea deals and blah, blah, all this kind of nonsense. Again, pushing the goal lines farther away. It's not that Q is wrong or incorrect or making all this stuff up. It's that it's already happened, but we just don't know about it. But it's fine. Everything is okay. And then you get Nader being arrested. Now, why is that significant? His close proximity to Trump and other prominent people within the White House, including at one point Steve Bannon. But the other thing is, what does Nader have now to play? I don't know. he might have his back up against the wall. If this guy, is smart, I mean, he's going to have to play ball on some level. He's going to have to give something up. I know he's given up a lot with the Mueller stuff, but I don't think that they're just going to let him go. He will flee back to the UAE, in which case, he'll never return to the United States, and he'll probably never, be charged with a crime, and God only knows how many more children he's going to abuse. But, so if I were Trump or his supporters, I would be a little nervous about what Nader may or may not say, what he might have to pull out of his, pocket in order to either skirt jail time or get a lesser sentence or something like that. But, especially with these sort of crimes, I mean, your back is always up against the wall. There's no, easy way out with this. And these are such disgusting, allegations against him, that he's going to have to really make some deals if he's going to survive the rest of his life, basically. So interesting. Of course, the Trump people are not going to be talking about this quite so much, because it doesn't really kind of play into their whole worldview that Trump is going to save us and lock up all the evil pedophiles. But yeah, I think the Nader thing is something that people should be looking up on, focusing on, especially too. I mean, the information that he knows just in terms of the Middle East. I mean, this guy's a long-time fixer. He goes back, like I said, back to Reagan. He was rumored at one point to be sort of a go-between between all sorts of groups, including Hezbollah, the Ayatollah. He's certainly an emissary for the United Arab Emirates. He's close friends with Eric Prince. So, I mean, this guy definitely knows where some of the bodies are buried. Just sort of scrolling down a little bit, it says Nader appeared disheveled and dressed in a khaki jumpsuit, arrived in Brooklyn federal court on Tuesday alongside his defense lawyer, Chris Clark, who revealed the Dubai resident returned to New York on Monday for a cardiologist appointment at Mount Sinai Hospital. Okay, so there we go. Again, all I had to do is just scroll a little bit down the article. So he returns for an operation. Now, how he couldn't do this in the UAE or Saudi Arabia or any number of other places is beyond me. Certainly, I would think someone of Nader's stature could go anywhere. Why he has to go to Mount Sinai is a little bit odd. Especially too, I mean, he could have, it's far. I'm sure he could have gone to Europe, unless there are some, charges we're not aware of in Europe, or possibly maybe some sealed indictments or an Interpol or something like that. But why he wouldn't go to somewhere in, UK or Germany is beyond me, or how they couldn't provide for this care in the UAE. Again, it's just a cardiologist appointment. I don't know. So it's interesting. And why he would go there is also a little strange. Actually, as I'm reading down on this, so here we go. Clark also claimed Nader had open heart surgery 5 weeks ago in Germany. So there we go. And had been suffering from complications. At the behest of his doctors in Germany, Nader was scheduled to meet with renowned cardiologist Dr. Ronnie Shimoni on Monday to discuss whether he needed another surgery or treatment at a rehabilitation center. Mr. Nader is supposed to be at Mount Sinai Hospital right now. Clark said the surgery in Germany took a couple arteries out and put a couple arteries in. This Mount Sinai visit wasn't just a checkup. Again, really? You're having heart surgery 5 weeks ago, then you're getting on a plane, you're traveling all the way over to New York. There's not a world-renowned cardiologist in Germany or in Europe that could help Nader. I find that a little difficult to believe. But again, I also find it difficult to believe. Now listen, maybe he was under the impression that he was safe. Why else would you jeopardize everything coming back to New York or coming back to the United States? Unless you thought nothing is going to happen to me. So very interesting why he's returning. Maybe this, he thought, the Mueller stuff is all over and done with. But, like I said, I don't think they're going to let him go. Again, if you read the criminal complaint, they absolutely shouldn't. And they should really kind of go after this guy. And I don't know. I know I've speculated about some of this stuff before. But I always thought that this would be kind of one of those things that would bring Trump down. I mean, these sort of lurid connections to sex crimes and whatnot. And this one might be, this might be one of those. I think, too, it's like Nader, again, he just sort of opens the door for the discussion at the very least. Why was, it's like, it's not just Epstein that Trump's going to, it's also this guy. It's others. I don't know. I think this is a story people should be checking out. Don't get so kind of caught up in the details about Nader and Bill Clinton and others. I mean, that's not to say that may not be a possibility. And certainly if it is, I'd love to know about it. But that's not front and center at this issue. And even beyond that, leaving aside the Trump thing, forget that. Nader should go down for being a scumbag, for possessing these videos and undoubtedly abusing children. Let's not lose sight of that and go for political points. Who's it going to be worse for, Trump or Clinton? That is more or less irrelevant. Although, Trump is the president. Bill Clinton's not the president. And certainly we know these recent documented, visits when Nader was part of the transition team. It just, again, it raises the question of if it's true, is Trump overruling the Secret Service and allowing a pedophile to take pictures of him at White House events and to have access to, Bannon and presumably to himself? Why is that? Why is Trump going out on a limb for this guy? Is this really keeping our enemies closer? I don't really think so. But that's, my own opinion. And very quickly, also on the Epstein front, I'll be doing something maybe next week. I'll cover in a little bit more in depth because there have been a couple of things, some interesting developments with that case and with the sort of ongoing cases and the whole scandal around Epstein. But it turns out good old Michael Wolff, author of Fire and Fury, he's coming out with another book. I guess, he just couldn't pass up that opportunity to put out another kind of gossipy, schlocky book and probably make several $1 million. So he's writing a sequel to Fire and Fury. I think it was The Guardian that got an advanced copy, or at least several chapters from the book. Turns out, once again, one of Michael Wolff's big sources is Steve Bannon. And again, I tend to actually believe a lot of the stuff that Steve Bannon does tell people, just because I don't think he really has much to lose, and I think he is he's a big enough figure that I think he can kind of occasionally really kind of be open with what he's saying. And I would listen to it again when you also factor in, that he's supposed to be such a good friend of the president's. And anyway, it turns out that among other things in the new Michael Wolff book, there's a whole section talking about some of his shady real estate deals down in Palm Beach, including I think it was like a $20 $8 million property or so that Jeffrey Epstein showed Trump, said he wanted to purchase it, and then Trump went behind his back and bought it. And according to Michael Wolff's book, and I don't know who his source was for this, but it could have been Bannon. Certainly Bannon has talked a little bit about Epstein in the past. And in fact, let's not forget, Bannon was photographed walking into Jeffrey Epstein's house here in New York City. It's a fact I forget sometimes. But apparently Epstein was pretty pissed about this, and he actually believed that this was all, kind of like basically like smoke and mirrors, that Trump didn't have this money to buy the house. And according to Michael Wolff's book, Epstein alleges that, Trump was actually working with some shady Russian real estate developer down in Palm Beach, that he was sort of that Trump was kind of used as a front maybe, so this Russian guy could buy the house. Very interesting. I might even, have to, I'm definitely not going to buy Fire and Fury 2, but I might, glance at it, at the bookstore, and see what I can gain in terms of the stuff related to Epstein. But again, these stories are they don't disappear. They keep popping up. George Nader is a perfect example. I had literally forgotten that this guy existed until his recent arrest. And these guys are like bad pennies. Look at Alan Dershowitz. He's screwed. I think Nader is screwed. So, again, little silver lining with all of this, especially to, all of those in the, hashtag resistance who just, can't get enough of that Russiagate, crack like, Russiagate, just, one more fix. Maybe shift your focus a little bit. Look at some of these other characters, Nader and Epstein. Put a little bit of time into that, because there's stuff there. There's stuff you can really kind of grab onto. So very important. I'm definitely going to be continuing this. I'll definitely do some updates on the George Nader stuff, because I don't think this guy really stands a chance of getting released. I don't think so. And if that goes to trial, I mean, there's definitely going to be some bodies unburied with that one. But I think we will leave it here for today. I want to thank my guest, Lizzy, for joining me in the first hour. Really important discussion. Definitely encourage people to check out Al Kamandjati, which is Kamandjati, the organization that Lizzy works for. Also check out some of the books and other resources that Lizzy talked about. And just to not feel so kind of like despondent and, complacent. There's a lot we can do. Even if it's, spreading the word about sickos like George Nader, making sure that, they get put down. I think all of that is really useful. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll be talking to you very soon.
Reminder that this is the Voice of America broadcasting worldwide.
Transistor Radio.
Morning, morning, morning. Uncle, the podcast.
The Ocelli Effect.
Porkins Policy Radio with Pierce Redmond.
On Ocelli.com.